DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Tens of thousands of Palestinians are pouring into Egypt to buy food, fuel, and other supplies today after militants destroyed most of a border wall in the Gaza town of Rafah. The border crossing comes on the sixth day of an Israeli blockade that's cut off all deliveries to Gaza amidst ongoing Israeli attacks. Israel says it's trying to stop Palestinian militants from launching rockets at nearby Israeli towns. Israel began allowing a limited amount of fuel deliveries on Tuesday following growing international pressure. UN relief official John Ging welcomed the move but warned of a deepening crisis.
The supplies coming into Gaza today are a welcome first step. They are a recognition that Gaza cannot survive for very long at all without supplies. We're teetering here for the last 7 months on the brink of a catastrophe.
The Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports the Israeli government plans to keep the border permanently closed, except in the case of a humanitarian emergency. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, the U.S. is blocking a UN Security Council measure that would condemn Israel's blockade and assault on Gaza as illegal. UN Undersecretary General for Political Affairs Lynn Pascoe warned Israel is carrying out collective punishment.
Israel must reconsider and cease its policy of pressuring the civilian population of Gaza for the unacceptable actions of militants. Collective penalties, let me remind you, are prohibited under international law.
The U.S. and Israel are also expected to boycott a meeting of the UN Human Rights Council on the crisis in Gaza set for today. Israel's envoy to the UN, Gilad Cohen, said Israel was acting as would any state.
I ask each member of the Council, what would you do if London, Moscow, Paris or Tripoli was attacked and fired on? Would you sit back and do nothing? I'm certain that no member state on this council, and certainly no country in the world, would be silent. And Israel is no different.
Speaking from Syria, Hamas political leader Khaled Mashal said the Palestinian rockets are a response to ongoing Israeli attacks.
The Palestinian rockets are a reaction to the occupation and aggression. Let Israel stop its aggression and end its occupation, and the resistance will stop its rockets, because the resistance is a way and not a goal.
A new study says the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo is killing around 45,000 people each month, half of them small children under the age of 5. The International Rescue Committee says the war in the Congo is the deadliest conflict since the Second World War, with 5.4 million people killed over the last decade. The majority of deaths were attributed to preventable conditions worsened by the fighting, including infectious diseases, malnutrition, and pregnancy-linked fatalities. The former so-called enemy combatant, Jose Padilla, has been sentenced to more than 17 years in prison. Padilla and 2 co-defendants were found guilty last year of conspiracy to commit terrorism and providing material support toward that goal. Padilla originally made international headlines in 2002 when President Bush declared him an enemy combatant for allegedly plotting to set off a radioactive dirty bomb inside the United States. He was stripped of all rights, transferred to a Navy brig in South Carolina, and held in extreme isolation for 43 months. The Bush administration denied him access to an attorney for 2 years. Faced with a Supreme Court challenge, President Bush finally announced criminal charges far less serious than the public allegations made at the time of Padilla's capture. Defense attorneys argued Padilla was unfit to stand trial and that the indictment should be dismissed because of government mistreatment. Prosecutors had urged a sentence of life imprisonment, but on Tuesday, Judge Marcia Cook cited what she called Padilla's, quote, harsh ordeal in U.S. custody as a factor in his sentencing. Judge Cook added, quote, there is no evidence that these defendants personally maimed, kidnapped, or killed anyone in the United States or elsewhere. A new study has provided the first count of the number of false statements made by the Bush administration in the lead-up to its invasion of Iraq. According to the Center for Public Integrity, President Bush and top White House officials made a total of 935 false statements about Iraq's alleged national security threat in the 2 years following the 9/11 attacks. The study counts a total of 532 times Bush and other officials stated unequivocally that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and was seeking to obtain them or had ties to al-Qaeda. President Bush hosted congressional leaders at the White House Tuesday for talks on a $145 billion stimulus package for the economy.
I believe we can find common ground to get something done that's big enough and effective enough so that an economy that is inherently strong gets a boost, to make sure that this uncertainty doesn't translate into more economic woes for our workers and small business people.
Most of the relief is said to focus on tax breaks for individuals, with some money for unemployment benefits and food stamps. On the campaign trail, Democratic hopeful John Edwards said the key to economic relief would come in addressing poverty.
What's been missing in the American economy is any kind of thoughtfulness about how, over the long haul, we grow and strengthen the middle class and lift people out of poverty. Those two things together are absolutely crucial. And usually, by the way, when you're doing one, you're doing the other.
Meanwhile, campaigning in Florida, Republican hopeful Mike Huckabee said long-term recovery hinges on abolishing taxes completely.
But the long-term economic recovery in this nation is getting rid of the IRS completely and implementing. I'd like to make it so that April 15th is just another beautiful spring day in Atlanta, as well as the rest of the country.
In other campaign news, former Tennessee Senator Fred Thompson has dropped out of the Republican presidential race. A new study is claiming to have totaled the first monetary estimate of the cost of global environmental damage caused by the world's richest countries. According to researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, the environmental damage wreaked on poorer countries amounts to more than the entire third world debt of $1.8 trillion. The study used data from the World Bank and UN to estimate the unpaid costs of greenhouse gas emissions, ozone layer depletion, agriculture, deforestation, and overfishing and shrimp farming. A new poll shows a majority of Americans oppose the key provisions of the Bush administration's plans to modify laws on government surveillance. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, 2/3 of respondents say the government should be required to obtain an individual warrant before monitoring conversations between U.S. citizens and people abroad. More than half also oppose the administration's push to immunize major telecom companies that took part in the spying. And in North Carolina, 7 activists are in court today to appeal their conviction for protesting outside the headquarters of the private military company Blackwater. The protesters say they were denied their constitutional right to a public trial. 6 of them were tried, convicted, and sentenced behind closed doors after the judge took the rare step of clearing the courtroom. They received jail terms ranging from 10 to 45 days. The 7 were arrested in October when they reenacted what happened in Baghdad on September 16th, when Blackwater forces opened fire and shot dead 17 Iraqi civilians. As part of the protest, the demonstrators drove a small station wagon covered with simulated bullet holes and smeared with red paint onto Blackwater's property. We turn now to Mary Grace, one of the defendants in the Blackwater case. She's on the way to the courthouse on her cell phone in North Carolina. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us about this trial? What will happen today?
Well, hopefully the judge will allow us to present evidence that we are upholding international law and necessity. However, that's unlikely in our courts. We don't seem to get justice here. So we're just looking forward to a jury trial, so we are anticipating speaking directly to the jury about what we did and why we did it.
Why did you do it, Mary Grace?
Well, we really, not just to call attention to the Nisour Square massacre, which we reenacted, but to try to get people to pay attention to what Blackwater and other independent contractors are doing in Iraq and to stop the ongoing commission of illegal actions under international law.
And what did you do? What was your participation in this protest?
I actually was watching the reenactment of a small portion of the Nisour Square massacre as the demonstration was unfolding. They were doing this reenactment, and as I watched, I was just so strongly moved that I simply stepped over closer to where they were, knelt down, and prayed.
This is an appeals court? This is a
Pardon
second
me?
trial? This is a second trial you'll be facing today?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the sentence that you face?
I only face 20 days. My charge is simple trespass. My co-defendants have up to 3 charges.
Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
Mary Grace speaking to us on the road on her cell phone. She is part of a group of protesters who protested outside Blackwater worldwide in North Carolina. Those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.